Good afternoon, YouTube. Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. This one's going to be a lengthy one. I don't know if you saw my post or not that I made about an hour ago, but things are looking like they're going to be getting, I would say, progressively busier. I'm trying to make sure I have the right words. It's one thing I always have a problem with. But anyway, this month is going to get progressively busier. We're going to be dealing with multiple threats of both severe and winter weather. So we'll start out by looking in the near term. On days 1 through 3, there's no real risk of severe weather, but days 4 through 8, in case you can't see it here, all of which show predictability too low. And that's going to be one of the first things we talk about after we take a look at the setup, because with this long range forecast, we're going to be looking through a good chunk of the month of February, so we may as well cover all the bases here. So let's go ahead and dive into the climate outlook here. The days 8 through 14 outlook, and here's the days 6 to 10 outlook. Notice on both of them we have a good blob of cold weather over here towards the west. This is what we call a negative PNA setup. I talked about it a little bit vaguely on my weekend forecast video from this morning. Link to that will be in the top right hand corner, by the way. But basically what's going on here is we have a area of cold air that's going to be stationed over the western half of the country and over towards the east. And while I'm pretty sure comically a lot of people do not feel that way right now across this region, as we're dealing with temperatures about 20 below zero in some spots here, or colder than that, we're actually going to end up being above average very soon in these regions. Also, one thing to note is because of the abrupt temperature change, make sure you're doing what you have to do to keep your immunity up. When these temperature spikes and drops happen in such rapid succession like what we're seeing here, your immunity can drop and you're very much vulnerable to getting sick. So, especially across this region right here, I would say, or pretty much anywhere north of this line in particular, and then maybe even over here as well. Make sure you have ways to keep your immunity up, stay bundled up over the first couple of days after the warm up begins. Because, again, no one wants to end up being sick. It's definitely not a fun experience. I actually dealt with a little bit of that after the Christmas freeze. That being said, that's what we have on both the 6 to 10 day outlook and day 8 through 14. We're going to continue to be on that negative PNA track. Cold air will be situated a little bit more so over California, especially central and southern California. Northern California, you're still going to be below average, but the confidence is slightly lower. And then, of course, the highest confidence for warm air is going to be over towards the northeast. But on days 8 through 14, the south is getting a higher chance of above average temperatures. And, of course, the Ohio Valley is still up high, up in the higher percentile, I'd say about 50 to 60%, 40 to 50 across the Tennessee Valley, into the Ozarks, and then into the Central Plains. But that's not the interesting part of this. The interesting part of this is going to be the precip. Pretty much on day 6 through 10, we can pretty much see where our storm track is going to be highlighted here. These are going to be the highest areas of concentration for precip between the 10th and the 14th. And then we have another little bullseye over here towards Maine. So there's going to be increased activity over there. And let's not forget Florida as well. Percentile ranges are relatively low. We're mainly going to be sitting at the 33 to 40, maybe even 50 percentile. And then, of course, there might be a small pocket where we could get into 60 percentile. But on days 8 through 14, and this is going to be really telling of how the times are going to be as we head towards the middle of the month, look at this area right here. We have a 50 to 60 percentile region that's popped up over Southern California into small portions of Arizona here and Nevada. And then there's a large swath of 40 to 50% chance of above average precip around the center of the country, even heading into the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and even parts of the Northern Plains. The only area that looks like they could see below average precip, and this doesn't necessarily mean, again, that you guys are going to be dry, is over towards Florida, southern Georgia, coast of South Carolina, over towards Charleston maybe, and the panhandle of Florida, and a tiny little piece of Alabama too. Now, one thing to note here, as I just said, is that Just because you have an above or below average precip chance does not mean you're going to get rain every day, nor you're going to get no rain for the entire month. So let's not get extreme here, and these are outlooks. These can very easily change. So we'll be keeping an eye on this as the days go by. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at what our pattern looks like on the models in regards to our storm tracks, storm intensity, etc. So let's make sure we're set right. And what we can see here, and this is like the earlier part of the model run, we pretty much know what's going on this weekend. It's going to be relatively quiet, with the exception of what's going on here in the Rockies, where we're going to be having periods of moderate to heavy snow up towards the higher elevations. Towards the lower elevations, the valley, so to speak, you're not going to really be seeing too much action. At least not right now. Once we get towards Monday, could be a different story. For the most part, I'm thinking it might be too warm, though, at least with this storm system. So as we push this further and further along here, the 7th is one of the first days that we can start to see that predictability 2 low tag from the Storm Prediction Center. We'll move this towards, I'd say, almost 7, 8 o'clock, or 6 or 7 o'clock local time for you guys. And we can see this closed off low that develops here. And we can see a little bit of energy out ahead of it. It's towards this sector right here where I'm interested in the threat of severe weather. Here's my new toy, by the way. Hope you guys like it. I just figured out how to use it recently. I'm still not a pro at it, so if my lines look crappy, I'm sorry. But over towards this region, this is an area that I'm concerned about in regards to severe weather. So I'd say towards the Texas coast on Tuesday, we're going to be watching you, and then we'll watch this threat transition a little bit further out to the east here a bit. We'll go towards the next day, and there, as of right now, there's really not too much going on the wintry side of this, but we need to keep an eye on this system right here for the potential of this phasing or interacting with this next storm system here, and then we could end up seeing a little bit more of a wintry situation developing here. Keep in mind we're using the Euro, so the other 2 models may be a little bit different, but as we move this along here, the storm, see, this is what I'm talking about right here, where the storm system starts to interact with this one. And basically, this could result in a much bigger storm. And notice these little thickness lines that I talk about here all the time. The 540 line isn't there yet, but the number is starting to drop. It's getting notably closer. And then by the next run here, as we head towards Thursday, now we see that 540 line. We have some cold air towards the center of this system. And then we have to watch for the threat of some winter weather developing across this region here. So basically anywhere from around here to around here. I did a crappy job with that line. But anywhere where I've marked right here, we'll have to watch you guys for the threat of winter weather. Could be some moderate to heavy snow with this. We'll just have to see how this plays out. This has been showing up on the last few runs that I've seen from both the Euro, GFS, and the Canadian models. So something to keep an eye on there. That being said, let's backtrack a little bit. Take a look at the severe weather threat. Because once we get towards the 8th, we start to see a little bit more of a linear threat begin to take shape here. You kind of see it with this, and we'll get a better idea of it once we look more so towards the precip. But you can see that develop here, and then through Thursday, we'll start to shift towards the wintry threat. Cool down is going to be set to take place right behind where this low develops. It's not going to be a big one, but this will set the stage for maybe some interesting weather popping up around the Ozarks. As we move forward, here's our next system, and this is going to be right around Valentine's Day. And it's looking like it kind of has that atmospheric river look to it, so I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. Extremely close, but the flood threat here across Southern California starts to come into play, and also even Northern California now. Let's not forget about these guys. Not to mention, there's a good bit of cold air coming behind this, so towards the northwest, we could be dealing with some big-time snow here, possibly. So this is towards the edge of this model run, so a lot is prone to changing with this, but this is This is what I'm talking. This is why we're making this video. It's looking like things are about to pick up a lot like how it did last month towards mid-month. That being said, let's go ahead and look at the Canadian model, and we're going to see a pretty similar look take shape here. This is the 5th, 6th, 7th, similar look. And you can still see, and on all three of the models, you see some interaction between the two. It doesn't really phase the same on the Canadian with this as well. We see another interesting feature, though, as we get towards the end of the Canadian's run, though. We'll jump all the way to the end here. See a big push of cold air that's going to be coming on the backside of this system here. And this could become a problem in regards to maybe some frozen precipitation, maybe even pushing a little further south than expected too. A lot of other factors are going to come into play into that, and we'll get into that in another video. But we'll have to watch this region right here maybe for a little bit of frozen precipitation. Still not in the habit of using this thing quite well yet, but right across here could maybe be some ice potential. It's a question mark. We'll have to see what this ends up doing. Let me see if I can draw a question mark real quick. I'm kind of having a little bit of fun with this. Not great at it. Sorry. Well, that wasn't that bad. Anyway, though, getting off topic here, getting off track. Let's go ahead and compare that to the GFS. We're going to go back to a manual setup with that. So let's go ahead and jump this back a bit. So here we are looking at the GFS. Make sure we got the time frame in there. And then we'll move this forward. And it's a pretty similar look. It's a little bit more robust looking on the GFS here, especially towards this region here that we can see over the Ozarks with those brighter colors. Storm doesn't look quite as organized though, so that's one question mark that we have. There's not like a lot of high confidence on this yet, but it could change. So we'll have to see what ends up what the storm prediction has in store for tomorrow, because by this point I'd say Tuesday will be in the day 3 range if I'm correct. Yeah, it will be in the day 3 range, so maybe we might get a small area, maybe a marginal risk. I would say the highest right now I could see with this is slight risk. As time goes on though, see this storm system come really robust with the GFS, a little bit further to the south too. So we'll have to watch this stretch here for potential snow. And then there's another big system that comes in behind this with a rapid cool down. This interacts with what looks to be another system right here. These two start to phase a bit, and a huge wintry system could be coming as a result of it here. And this cold air pushes really far to the south here. I'm going to try to actually put the marker in another color, so that way we can get a better idea of what's going on here. Because if I do it in black, you're not going to see it. So here we are again. I'm going to try to do this in green here. But right around here is where our 540 line is. And that's where our freezing point is. So if there's any moisture that interacts with this portion right here, we could be dealing with some winter weather. And that's pretty far to the south. February is an active time of the year across the south as far as winter precip. So you just need a storm system that comes in with around the right time, with proper temperature, so to speak. So it's going to be interesting to see how this develops from here. So now that we see that, I got to clear that off real quick. There we go. Still getting used to it. But look how far that cold air pushes. And this is even heading into Friday night, Saturday morning here. Areas like Birmingham, Atlanta, Montgomery, you're looking like you're going to be below freezing. And we'll move this forward. And this cold air does linger for about a day or two. So depending on what may fall, it could stick. Again, there's a lot of other factors we have to look at there. So I can't say whether you will get any sort of frozen precipitation at all. And if it does, will it even stick? Can't answer that just yet. We're already looking close to 200 hours out at this point. So now we see yet another system with cold air coming in across the Great Lakes. This could stir up a lake effect snow event. Meanwhile, look at this joker right here. This is a huge storm system. This is where the concern for that atmospheric river comes into play again. Because, look, it's a pretty much a bombed out cyclone. Comes back into play. Moisture flow begins to fall right into Southern California and around Arizona. And then we see a similar look going on towards Central California. And then we see another one looking like it's trying to come in right behind it. A little bit smaller, but see multiple lows hitting towards the western half of the country. So, like I said, this kind of has that deja vu kind of look, unfortunately. I'm really hoping this doesn't end up being the case because these guys got slammed over here last month. That being said, see multiple storm systems and a very active storm track. This also kicks up some moisture from the Baja and has it heading across Texas, across the Ozarks, and then across pretty much the Tennessee Valley. Southeast could get involved in that too. So this could increase a flood threat as we get towards the latter portion of the month here. So there is a lot to keep track of. Let's go ahead and show what it looks like on precip form. Oops. So here we are looking at our precip model. Here's the Euro first. And of course, as we mentioned before, it's not really until the afternoon of the 7th where things start to pick up. Really looks like it could be a late evening overnight threat. So far, it looks more so like a messy kind of convection or messy convection type deal. A couple of storms over towards the coast could end up being severe. Further north you go, I think the less likely you are to see severe weather. This mainly looks like a maybe marginal damaging wind threat. And the same can be said as we go on towards the 8th. We'll still have to see how this evolves here, but as we head towards the 8th, however, I do notice a little bit more of maybe a multicellular type event. Warm sector still doesn't look that impressive, so it's going to be a question mark to see what goes on here. I think everything's going to be relatively relegated to the coast. Then we do see a little bit of a squall line try to develop here. Again, the warm sector isn't super abundant, so this is going to be a very much a limiting factor in severe weather potential as we head towards the 9th. And then here's where we start to see that winter storm start to blossom right around here. This is that little snow belt that I was talking about when we were looking at the vorticity map. Here's a good example of it right here. As that low starts to really deepen and kind of close itself off, that cold air starts to wrap around the center, and here's where we end up getting our frozen precipitation. We move this further and further forward. The storm system heads out, then the next one pops up. And actually, I think I got the models mixed up here. I think the Canadian maybe was the one I saw where there was some freezing rain potential here. We'll have to see what that ends up yielding. So let's actually go over to that Canadian here. It's a lot to keep up with sometimes. It's easy to make this mistake. But even so, forgive me for that one. That being said, here's our next storm system. It looks a little bit more robust over towards the Canadian model. Much bigger snow pocket develops here. And I accidentally have clicked the sounding. But now as this moves forward, here, right towards the end of this run, right here, this is what I was talking about. We're right in between that 540 threshold right here. And this looks like it's in an area that's unfortunately seen an ice storm recently. I really hope this doesn't end up being the case. The Canadian often flip-flops a lot, so let's not get too excited about this just yet, or too worried about it, I should say. Because this forecast is 240 hours out. It's 10 days from now. More than likely, this will change. We'll see what this does. We're hoping that it downtrends because I know you guys are sick of this. That being said, let's go ahead and make that comparison with the GFS. And the GFS is probably the most interesting of the three models that I've seen so far. So put this in frame here. And of course, we get towards the 7th. See some severe potential possible here, but not a whole lot going on there. I think for the most part it stays quiet. And then as time goes on, that's when we start seeing a little bit of increased potential. I think this is more so leaning towards a heavy rainfall event than a severe event. But then we start to see this little line develop here. And that's what makes me a little bit unsure still. Warm sector doesn't look super abundant though, and that's one thing that I think is going to really limit severe potential with this. That low develops a little bit later, and that cold air kind of lags a little bit with this one too. So as a result, I think the snow totals could be limited. But look right here though, and this is what the Canadian was kind of showing too. And this is what kind of has me on the fence about what could be going on here. The Euro shows nothing, but the Canadian and the GFS show something here. This also has us more so in the form of snow. The cold air is a little bit more abundant, and the moisture is just sitting right there in that small pocket. It's like a small clipper system that develops that eventually would turn into a nor'easter that mainly is going to be suited for bringing snow across the interior and rain towards the coast. So a lot of areas will end up starting out as rain, and there's some potential for areas like Philly and New York to maybe end out as snow as we head towards next weekend, according to the GFS. We'll have to see what that ends up doing, but none of the other models are really picking up on that quite in the same kind of abundance. And then over here towards the west, here's where our problem begins with a potential river here. And then over here we see another robust snowstorm. This one looks like it has a much longer pocket of snow that develops here. Still could be some potential for severe weather. Kind of hard to say at this point given how far out we are looking at this. And then of course over towards this region we see a multitude of storms coming in, and it kind of looks wacky at this point now. Here's that piece of energy I was talking about that was going to cause storms to potentially train over these regions towards the end of the model, the GFS model run with the vorticity. We'll have to watch this for the threat of flash flooding. And then here's yet another storm system staring down the northwest here. So we'll have to keep an eye on that too. A lot going on in the country. A lot expected to be going on in the country. We'll see if all of this holds up, and we'll see how this progresses here. See what uptrends and downtrends. But the fact of the matter is, with all that we're seeing, there's going to be something significant that goes on at some point during this month, I think. Let's go ahead and take a look at all the temperatures now. So I just had kind of a Sherlock moment come into play. You know what I really meant to say, but I'm obviously trying to keep things clean. But I just thought about how I always make these little comparisons with the snowfall models using the blend of models. I can pretty much do the same with temperatures. So we're just going to look at it. We're going to look at it here because the blend of models honestly seems to be the closest with temperatures most times. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to run this along, and we're going to basically kind of highlight where our surface temperatures are going to be coldest. Of course, we're looking at this region here towards the northeast, and then of course towards the mountains we're going to be dealing with some pretty cold temperatures. Now, one thing to note here is that warm sector that we're going to have developing right around the time of severe weather. So here we are looking towards Tuesday night, and right around here is where I'm concerned about the threat of severe weather, but it's not like the temperatures are super warm, and moisture is also going to be a big question with this. I'm not going to get into all the details. I think I'll do that tomorrow more so because this video is probably already running about 20 minutes long. But we do have decent surface temperatures. We're getting into the mid to upper 60s for a lot of regions. A couple of 70s are possible here. And then as we move that along, it heats up more so across this region here towards Louisiana, Mississippi. So we'll be watching this area throughout the day for an increased threat of severe weather. Storms will end up passing through, and then after that, we'll kind of watch towards maybe, I'd say, southern Georgia for potential of severe. Again, these mainly look like they're going to be marginal risk due to a lack of low-level moisture and maybe mid-level temperatures, I'd say. Then as we move this along, I'd say this is when I would be concerned about this region right here. towards Saturday and Sunday, because the morning of Sunday we're getting below freezing for a large portion of the eastern half of the country, pretty far south too. Atlanta, Montgomery are in the action as well. But this quickly warms up, and then towards the 13th and in Valentine's Day, that's when we start to warm back up pretty nicely. But that's the end of this model run. Let's actually switch it back to the GFS really quickly, and we'll go ahead and take a look at what the rest of that run is going to look like. So here we are loading the GFS, waiting for things to update here. And then we can see how things are starting to warm back up. But our battle zone begins to develop once again right across here towards central Texas. And we'll have to watch that for potential of severe weather. We'll have to see if a storm system comes along this track here and ends up taking advantage of this. Of course, other dynamics come into play. And given how far out we are, there's no point in really being able to look at it because it's very much prone to change. But with this negative PNA setup, it lends itself towards the increased threat of severe weather. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Ice storms and winter storms are still very much prevalent. So we still have a lot to look at as we head through February. Just because you got a prediction on Groundhog Day, honestly, it doesn't mean that much. Weather's still going to be weather at the end of the day. But that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, of course, definitely drop me a like. I appreciate it. And if you haven't already, do the double click where you like and subscribe. Share the channel with anyone that might be interested in this outlook video or long range forecast, whichever one you want to call it. I'll have a video for you guys up in the morning. That'll be for the Weather Nerd playlist. And then, of course, we'll try to get into the dynamics of this upcoming system to start. That'll be around the start of midweek, I would say. But anyway, this has been Tire Metal at Weatherman. I hope you guys enjoyed. Take care and enjoy your Saturday.